All comments is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism. All comments is made for reporting purposes, scholarship, and research. Comment. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statutes and otherwise may infringe use permitted non-copyright. Educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Welcome to the Ear Mob Podcast. I am your host, Chaz Dumbo. Good morning, everybody. Isn't it a lovely morning? Anyways, I've been wanting to do this interview for quite some time, and he was kind enough to agree to come on. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory here before we let Joseph take it away. Years ago, it would have been 25 years ago, I was listening to Mike Siegel conduct an interview on Coast to Coast AM. Mike Siegel was the original heir apparent to the Coast to Coast AM empire that Art Bell had built. Anyways, Mike had this gentleman on, Joseph, here, and Joseph was telling this story, and it was such an unbelievable story, but it was on Coast to Coast AM, and it fit right in line with everything and all the other topics that they were discussing on that show. And so I listened to it and really felt captivated by the story. And lo and behold, 25 years later, I've got the original author on this podcast with me here. So, Joseph, would you mind giving us a one-on-one on what the hell I'm talking about?
You were talking about Ong's hat.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, Mike was fun. We did 4 hours, and the funny thing about that is people have noticed that if you listen to the recordings, because it is up on archive.org, if you listen to that recording, my voice sounds like 10 times deeper than it is now. And the story behind that, which a couple of journalists I've talked to over the years have asked me this question, so I'll just answer up front. I was in New Orleans for Halloween, and I landed about 2 days before this show that Mike and I were going to do was supposed to air, because they do Coast to Coast does live. And I forgot, or didn't forget, I lost track of time, because in New Orleans that happens. And I was basically up for 2 days partying like an animal in the French Quarter of New Orleans, smoking cigars and drinking liquor. And then it dawned on me, like, oh my God, I have an interview tonight on Coast to Coast. I better get it together. And so I did get it together. I took a nap and drank a bunch of coffee, and I'm like, because I'm going to be up all night. But if you notice, when I was talking, my voice was very deep, because it was like, I had the 2 days of whiskey and cigars.
Right. And then the show happens so late in the evening as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they call you at 10 o'clock. I was in New Orleans. I don't know if it was 10 o'clock, but it was in the middle of the night. They basically call you and you're up. And I did the whole 4 hours. So I was up till 2 in the morning or whatever it was. Somehow I held it together. People told me that was a good show. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you liked it, because I kind of don't remember most of it. But that's not true. I mean, I do remember most of it, but yeah, I was like, I pulled it together long enough to do the show, and I kind of fell apart for a day. I slept for almost 24 hours after that. And it's like, okay, that's done. So anyway, they Coast to Coast reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do a show. And I talked to the producers, because the producers screen you pre-show. And I didn't say this is all true, but I didn't say it's not true. I'm like, I said I don't really know how I come down on this. Is it true or not true? There's these documents, and they make these claims, and that's all I can tell you. I'm a researcher looking into these to verify these documents, blah blah blah. That's how I presented it, and they went for it. they said, okay, we can go with that. I don't know if they were desperate for guests, or, I don't know if Art would have let that fly. Because when I originally was contacted by them, I was supposed to talk to Art. And this was like during the period of time when he was doing that, I'm back, I'm not back, I'm back, I'm not back, because I think he was having back problems, like really serious back problems.
He also was having legal battles at that point.
Yeah. There was like all kinds of stuff going on. I think he was unhappy with the network. I think he was wasn't that the period of time where like there was like somebody he was suing, or they were suing him, and
yeah, somebody had gone online and claimed that his the sheriff's department in his small town of Pahrump, which is about 60 miles from me, I'm in Vegas.
yeah,
So his somebody had went online, or not online, but they had went on a radio show, and then they had posted online something to the effect that he was a child molester.
yeah, and it involved
And
his son.
they were covering it up, and at that same time his son had gone through some pretty rough things. That I guess his high school gym teacher kidnapped him and took him across state lines and raped him.
Right.
And that gentleman actually ended up being HIV positive. But I think his son luckily didn't, contract the disease.
Right.
But his son is obviously pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
Art's doing 5-6 nights of radio a week, and he's got to deal with all this stuff. I mean, I don't blame him for stepping.
Oh, no, not at all, dude. Because like I'm not at the level of Art Bell, but I've gone through some stuff because of being a public personality, and so I really get it. I understand. Like sometimes you just like you can't deal with all this stuff, and you just kind of drop out.
Right.
And then people, of course, everybody has to step up and like, offer their conjecture of like why you stepped down. It's like, and that's really irritating. So, but I get it. I understand. I mean, I've not been to the level that Art was at, but I've been to my level, and that was enough. I can't imagine being Art Bell. And so for me, I had these, when I started this project, and this is an art project, we started back in the 89, and mostly we propagated the information through zines, which were real popular in the 80s. And we did a lot of Xerox art and pamphleteering and word of mouth and like all these things that we were doing pre-internet. And then I it was a team of 3 at the time, four people. And I was the one that was the tech guy, and so I was really into the bulletin board systems, and I was a huge Art Bell fan, like, monstrous Art Bell fan. And I was like on his bulletin board systems in the early days. And, he was Art was a lot of things, and he dealt with a lot of cool subjects, but more than anything, and I think people don't realize this, Art was a nerd.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, big nerd, dude. And he was like into electronics, which I was into. He was into shortwave radio, which I was into, ham. Like he kind of fit the profile of like the stuff that I was into, he was into. And so of course I would gravitate to that. And of course all the things that became the X-Files, like he started all that. And so anyway, I was doing art projects, and basically coming from the background that I came from, I was a fan of Robert Anton Wilson's. I eventually became a friend of his, and so I was in that milieu, the early days of aliens and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff was all back in the 80s, was stuff that worked through a mail art network. So you would find out about something one way or another, and almost, like to the T, you would send in $2 to a PO box somewhere, a lot of times in Vegas.
Well, of course. Yeah, I grew up here, so.
Yeah. And I mean, that seemed to be the center of where it was all happening. And so you'd send in your $2 and you get back this Xerox stuff. you know. So the Commander X stuff, the Dulce base, the underground Dulce stuff, all that stuff was coming out of PO boxes. And so we put together a project that was kind of a parody of all that stuff that was going on. And we created a catalog. Some of it was real books and some of it was books that were not so real. And we started circulating that through the underground milieu of the same people that were doing all the stuff I was just talking about. They were selling these catalogs through a PO box. And most of those people, I noticed, gravitated and kind of segued over to the bulletin board system culture. Art did. All the people that were like, all the people that you would have seen in the male culture, like doing the weird UFO catalogs and all that, they ended up on the bulletin board system. So there was a subculture going on there. And then about 93, everybody started to move towards public internet access because that started to become available. And so the project, I started doing mail art first, and then I put it on bulletin board systems because, you know, my partners at that time started to drop off because they weren't tech people. Right. And I said, do you want to do this with me? And they're like, we have no idea what you're even talking about. So I'm like, okay, well, guess I'm doing it alone. And so I put it on bulletin board systems. And then in 93, I started to move it over to the real internet via FTP sites, Gopher sites, Usenet. And then eventually around 94, 95, I started to build web pages. So like it actually grew up with the internet, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of, you know, today we have Facebook and we have X and we have all the other social media networks, and they're kind of the new version of the bulletin boards, how everybody interacts. Because back then, I mean, you were talking about this like the late 80s. I mean, you know, the Bob Lazar story was just starting to circulate with George and John Lear. And then you had William Cooper circulating his stuff.
Exactly.
You know, so I mean, that's where it was. If you wanted to hear about stuff like that, it wasn't right out there in the open for everybody to read. I mean, you had to kind of go searching for it a little bit, and that
you had to seek it out.
To it, yeah,
you had to seek it out, and it kind of didn't seek you out, but that was the element that we added to this. Like I said, what I want to do is I want to build. I was kind of this, you know, the strategy guy of the project. I said I want to build this, you know, story, this backstory, and then I want to get it in front of people in weird ways. So I want to leave the pamphlet in coffee shops and record stores and like, you know, like all the things that you would do back then if you had a band, because I come from the punk milieu. Right. You know, like if we had a show, we would make flyers, we'd put it on poles, and then we would leave it in record stores and bookshops, and you know, and I did exactly the same thing with this. I promoted it like it was a band.
Right.
And it worked. I mean, because it got the underground subculture people that I was after anyway, because that's really who this is addressed to, is like the weirdos of the world, because I'm one of them. So I put it in the places where the weirdos would run across it. And if you notice, the first thing that is in that set of documents is this statement: you've been searching for us without knowing it.
Right.
Like this statement of like, ooh, you found us. We found you.
Right.
Ooh, the Matrix, you know.
The Matrix, exactly.
Well, the Matrix was later, but yeah, like we were kind of like, we were doing the same thing the Matrix did, or that Blair Witch did, you know, which is pretty cool. I just talked to one of the actresses that was in the Blair Witch, who told me she felt like they took their idea from Ong's hat. And I'm like, well, maybe the distribution thing, yeah, but not the idea, because they're two different stories. So she's like, yeah, I know, but like you kind of did that first. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, but different stories, and that's cool. I'm cool with that. So anyway, that the whole thing was like, get it in front of people and make them feel like it found them, you know. So
Yeah, like they stumbled across something
on purpose.
Right.
It's like we put this here, magically, mysteriously. It's like again, go back to the Matrix. It's like Morpheus talking to Neo on the computer. Like the first thing you see is him talking to Morpheus via text chat.
Right.
Like before he meets Morpheus, Morpheus has been intruding into his computer and saying, I'm watching you, Neo. It's like I wanted that kind of feeling. That's why when I saw the Matrix, I'm like, yeah, like that. But I think we achieved that because so many people have told me that they felt like they found a message in a bottle when they found the Angsat material.
Right.
Because in the beginning it says specifically, this is for you, and you didn't find this by accident, which is kind of true, because if you were the right kind of person, then you were in the places and positions that I put it in, so you would find it,
Right. Yeah. You were talking about, record stores and bookstores and
coffee shops,
just on like little racks inside places, you just kind of drop
exactly
it off.
Yeah.
And then when somebody comes across it and they gravitate towards it because it may be something that they're into,
Exactly.
if they're into UFOs and stuff like that, they're not going to know what to make of it other than, oh man, how did I not know about this?
Yeah.
I need to find out what this is all about. There's no way I didn't know about this. This is crazy. And it's just, that's very much the same. Like when all of a sudden, you've got this guy and he's backlit, and his voice has changed and he's on local TV here in Vegas talking about this wild story about working on UFOs and stuff like that. And you're just sitting here going, they've always suspected that stuff goes on out there, but a lot of people didn't even know that Area 51 existed up until that point. And now the story's blown wide open. And it's the same thing with yours. Nobody had any idea about Ong's Hat other than some, if you were local to New Jersey and the Pine Barrens, a story about a guy, it kind of gets a little mischievous with a couple of ladies and they take his hat, throw it on the ground, step on it, and now it's stuck up in a tree or something. That's Ong's Hat. That's kind of the story there, the local legend. But I mean, you took that and ran with it.
Well, I mean, there's more to it than that, which is interesting. If you dig a little bit into the Ong's Hat story, there's two threads that basically help the Ong's Hat story, which is, first one is that area. If you go out there and talk to people in that area, there's all kinds of legends about that area.
Right.
There's the Jersey Devil.
Right.
There's supposedly some sort of military mishap that happened where like maybe a nuclear weapon was lost, or nobody really knows, but they know that like all of a sudden troops landed and they were looking for something, and they told everybody, get the hell out of here. And they were doing something. Right. So, that adds to the legend. And then the other thing that people don't know is, if you look up online, there was a mathematician from Princeton called John Tukey, Tukey, I believe it is. And John and his friends used to have these fanciful ideas, being mathematicians. I don't know if you ever hung out with mathematicians, but a lot of them have like extreme senses of humor. Like they're really funny people, but they're very dry in the delivery. But they're funny. And Tukey's one of these people, and him and his friends would have these fanciful ideas that they couldn't publish, of course, in the scientific journals. But so they made up a character, this Indian guy named Pondicherry, who would write these. They would write these funny mathematical stories under this pseudonym, and his address was in Ong's Hat.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So they would publish these stories in the journals under this pseudonym from this guy from Ong's Hat. And when asked why they chose Ong's Hat, Tukey said that was a place they used to go during the summer because it was like way out in the middle of nowhere. They could get a bottle of wine or five and throw down a blanket and sit around and drink wine and have these discussions away from the university, so that there was no problem with because a lot of times these guys are working for the military as well as the university, so they have to be careful with what they're associated with, because the military hears them talking about taking drugs and going to other dimensions. They're gonna be like, do we want this guy on our team? They could lose their job. So
Right.
so it was like this undercover thing that they did. So Ong's Hat, almost in a lot of ways, what he was describing was the makeup of the people that made up all this, the ashram of Ong's Hat in the story. It was made up of scientists and mystics. And so he kind of set the table for that, which at the time that the Ong's Hat story was created, I did not know about John Tukey and his story. I discovered it years later on the internet. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this sounds really familiar. So I mean, in a lot of ways, it writes its own story. It's kind of weird, but it does. It continually does that.
Right. And that's I mean, you're still getting new people discovering it daily.
Yep.
And so real quick, what's kind of give me the 101 of what how the story, like what started the story and what the actual story is, and then we'll kind of get into some of the aftermath of it and how it's changed throughout the years and how it's affected your life.
Well, the story started, like I said, 89. It was really 3 people, 4 people, depends. I mean, basically 4 people. Where we started doing this thing where, are you familiar with the concept of exquisite corpse?
No, sir.
Okay. So the surrealist, or was it Dada? I think Dada started it. There was a way you created a poem. Was you'd write a sentence or a stanza or whatever, and then you'd give it to your friend, who would then write the next one.
Right.
And then you'd give it to another friend who'd write the next one. So it was like this Frankenstein constructed piece of art where you're passing it around and people were changing it and adding to it and subtracting from it. And then, when it was like, what was that game that we used to play when we were kids? Musical chairs. So
Right.
like all of a sudden you said stop, and that's like everybody had to sit down wherever they were, and like one person would get a chair. It was kind of like that. So you were just passing it around, and then eventually somebody would yell stop.
Right.
And then that was it. Like, that's the poem, So we were doing that with a story. And as we progressed along doing it, we got to like 4 pieces. Yeah, by 93, I think there was 4 pieces, which people have declared the canon, and I hate that word, but okay, sure. It was the 4 primary originating pieces. And then I decided to move it online because I felt like the distribution, that was all brand new. Like, online was brand new at that time. So I looked at this and I said, the distribution I can achieve with online is far out going to strip the stuff I'm doing with Xerox machines and mail art and PO boxes, like, and leaving it in bookstores and all that. I mean, that's well and good, and it did okay for what it was. But I'm like, we could hit the next level of this with this online thing, because we literally can put it in places where millions of people can access it over time.
Right.
And I talked to my partners about it, and they literally didn't understand what I was talking about.
Right.
Because like, one guy was like a total Luddite. He hated technology. So of course he didn't like it. And everybody else was like, I don't know what are you talking about? Like, online? What? I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I started writing more pieces and starting distributing online. And then online first was bulletin board systems. And then public internet access became available. gradually. I mean, it was always available for, I think, since the 70s, but you had to be military or somebody high up in a university. Now it became publicly accessible to, like to the general public. And that was about 93, I think, when the switch kind of flicked on that. And that's when people in the general public, the populace, started to hear about online and the internet, and all these things became like, oh, what's that? And then 94, 95, we saw the web, which boom, that blew up. And then Netscape, and then the big Netscape explosion. And all of a sudden, like, it just kept growing and growing and growing, this accessibility of digital media. And so I just kind of rode that wave like a surfer, just kind of rode on top of that wave. And every time there was a new form of distribution, I would adapt the story to that, and then I would put it out there. So that's kind of what it was. It was, the story started as, the core story was, there were scientists from Princeton who were interested in, quantum physics, chaos mathematics. At that time, that was becoming popular. All these different new forms of math and new forms of science. And also mysticism. So like you had the union of mathematics and mysticism, which actually was happening in a sense, in that quantum physics was reaching these areas where, in order to describe the phenomena, you had to use language that sounded like Buddhism, or mysticism, and a lot of physicists acknowledged that. They said, yeah, that's actually, like, we've reached this area where science is describing what these forms of meditation and religion used to describe. They're describing them in a more mathematical and scientific way. And so we kind of rode that wave of like the merging of those two things by creating a story where there was mystics and mathematicians that came together in a place called Ongshat, New Jersey, in the Pine Barrens, formed a off-site ashram, so it was away from the university, and they explored areas that they probably couldn't get away with exploring at the university. So you had the marriage of mathematics and mysticism through actual physical devices, but also forms of meditation and drug use, psychedelic drug use.
Right.
And so to get people in the right state of mind, which, quantum physics was talking about these sort of things, get people in the right state of mind with the technology, you could open up a gateway to another dimension.
Right.
And so that's what we were riding off of, which was all this stuff that was being talked about in the scientific community. It's like, maybe this is, like the next step in consciousness. Is the next step. If you remember, Princeton was home to the Pear Project, where they were doing these experiments with something called an egg, which were these little devices that they distributed around the world that you would plug into a computer that was a random number generator.
Right.
Yeah. And so they would monitor that, and then they would see like these weird spikes in the types of numbers that are being generated. And then they would look at what happened at that time in that area, and they would see correlation,
Right.
I mean, nobody ever proved causation, but they did see correlation. There was even the most famous one was right before 9/11 happened, before the planes hit the tower, this huge spike. And they were like, what that was? Boom, planes hit the tower.
Right.
And I mean, it was literally like leading up to it and right when it happened. So there's something there for sure. And the quantum physicists had already been talking about, like, entanglement and all these different phenomena that they've noticed. So we were leveraging off of that, which was becoming popular not only in the scientific communities, but at that time there were people writing these books for lay people. So chaos mathematics, I think Fred Allen Wolf wrote a really good book about that, like breaking it down and explaining it to the lay audiences. Quantum physics had 3 or 4 books about that. My friend Nick Herbert, who's in this story, by the way, wrote some books about quantum physics and broke it down for the layperson. Like, what is this really? What does this mean to you? You know, the truck driver
Right.
who likes to read, and kind of like broke it down to language for people. And so it was a popular thing to do at that time. And so we kind of capitalized on that wave that people were interested in this thing. And we could build a story around this thing and lay it out there for people, and they would find it enjoyable. Now, there's enough unbelievability and humor woven into the story that I never in my life expected that people would take it seriously.
Right.
I didn't think we had to put a disclaimer on it.
Right.
Because does Alice in Wonderland need a disclaimer? No.
Right.
You know, did The Matrix need a disclaimer, the movie? No. But for some reason, people are saying I should have put a disclaimer on this. I don't agree with that. I think that if I had to read a disclaimer in front of all the fiction I've ever read, it would ruin it.
Right.
It would ruin the experience.
Right. And when you're talking about something like that, you mentioned The Matrix. I mean, there's people to this day that swear up and down they can prove we're actually living in a matrix.
Oh, yeah.
And there's enough there, something happens, and you're like, holy smokes, they could be right.
Well, what do you think? Right. That's what fiction is.
Right.
Fiction says this could be possible, or let me tell you this story from a different angle. You know, so fiction is not like all BS. Fiction is just storytelling for different reasons, and people don't realize. I think people have lost the thread somewhere. Storytelling is one of the most powerful things that humanity has. It's how we hand down history. It's how we hand down useful information from generation to generation.
Right.
It's like, very simply put, the story about those dark woods over there, there's a monster, is probably to keep you out of there because there's bears.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it really breaks down to be that simple sometimes. And so, you know, the shaman comes up with a fanciful story that he tells because that sticks in your head. Because again, storytelling is a mimetic thing that we do, but it sticks. The reason we tell these fanciful stories is because you'll remember it. It's a lesson that will be remembered.
Right.
Whereas if dad says to you, don't go in those woods over there, you're probably going to go in the woods, you know?
Absolutely.
Unless he tells you this whole story about, once when I was a kid, I was walking through those woods and a giant came from, you know, like he tells you this like wonderful mythical story that does have a point, but it also has a mimetic hook to make you remember it. And also it has, you know, these emotional hooks. So like it triggers fear, which is, you know, what you need if you want to stay out, keep them out of the woods. It does all these things that stories do. And that's why we have stories as humans. And we've kind of forgotten that because we've turned that facility over to people like Disney, you know? Blah. But we have done that. And so, you know, like if it's not in a Marvel movie, we don't want to hear about it anymore, which is ridiculous. But, you know, that's where we are. So storytelling, I think we've forgotten the power of storytelling. We've forgotten how to determine if something is truth or fiction. We've lost a lot of our power of discernment. And so with the internet, I think nobody saw this coming. At least I didn't. In the late 90s, when people that had never been on the internet as long as I had been, for example, and my friends had been, showed up on the internet. You had homemakers and, people that didn't know where they were. They thought they were reading a newspaper. And so if it said there's a giant swarm of locusts on the way, they thought that was literal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you were talking earlier about how you weren't sure Art would have let you on the air.
Probably not.
Story, right? Well, he had Mel's Hole. And
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I listen to u7.org these days.
Right.
I still listen to Art religiously. Every night I go to sleep listening to Art. Because that's what I've always done for 25 years, 30 years. And so, yeah, things like Mel's Hole, the guy who shot Bugs. The guy who shot the Bigfoot and buried him and gave Art the directions, but you can never tell. Yeah.
Right.
It's like he knew what was going on. There's just good radio.
Right.
And
yeah,
then I did hear him take like somebody apart one time. Did you hear him when the kid from Hawaii who wanted to fly a hang glider into the hollow earth through the hole in Antarctica?
That had to be that was in a later year.
That was in a later year, but it was still coast to coast.
Right, because I've listened. I started over. I've listened right now every show up through his retirement in would have been April of 2000. So now I'm moving on past that.
Yeah, this was a little bit after that, but like right around there, because I remember he asked the guy if who was the producer that got you on the show, and then he said, I think he said Leilani, and Leilani was the producer when I was on. So I think that's and you could tell from that when him talking to this guy that he was going to have a conversation with Leilani afterwards,
right?
Because he was like really unhappy with this guy's like total lack of, any like the guy had this idea. He really shouldn't have been on Coast to Coast. I mean, I can say that he just wasn't good. He wasn't good entertainment, but basically he was like, well, I have this idea, like, and Art's like, well, how do you know where the hole to the hollow earth is? Oh, I just know.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And he's like, and I'm going to fly it down. He's like, well, where are you going to go? I don't know till I get there, but I'll just know, and Art's like, yeah, who got you on the show?
Yeah, he did that one time when he was, I believe it was when he was actually on Sirius satellite radio for that brief short period of time.
Yeah.
He had a guest on who was talking about some UFO crash retrieval here in Nevada somewhere. And the guy lasted 45 minutes before Art just abruptly cut him off the air and then just went into a 5-minute tirade on how this guy was just a terrible guest. And,
and he probably apologized to the audience.
Right. And, he's just like, hey, sometimes, man, you just know when a guest is a stinker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you made it on a show. You made it 4 hours with Mike, and I thought Mike was great.
I had a good time with Mike. I enjoyed Mike. Mike asked good questions.
Right.
If he knew that I was full of crap, he didn't let on. Mm-hmm. Because I never said this is real, this is what's happening. I said these documents say this happened, and I'm researching, did this really happen?
Right. And that is essentially as much of a disclaimer as you gave anybody at that point. And that's
at that time,
that's feeding into the story, and that allowed that story to have legs. And you came out with that at the right time because everybody was chomping at the bit for, if you were into UFOs, if you were into ghosts, if you were into aliens, if you were into Bigfoot, if you were into anything on the fringe, that time period of the late 80s, especially, when Bob Lazar, that story came out,
right?
JFK assassination, you felt like you were part of an exclusive club, like you were smarter than everybody else because you were
Exactly.
researching and diving into these things.
You have been
And
searching for us without knowing it.
exactly. Everybody else was going on with their lives and they had no idea what was really going on.
Yeah.
And you came out with this story and you never said, hey, this isn't true, or hey, this is true. You never said that. You just, you built this thing and let people believe what they wanted to believe with this story. And it was, we live our lives as, especially like I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy. Like I'm
Yeah,
not
me
the whole
neither.
tinfoil hat
Yeah.
guy, but I listen. And now, this day and age, you hear something, you're like, oh man, there's no way that's true. And then you find out 6 months later that a small piece of it's true.
Right.
And then
But that's always been the case.
right.
I mean, I used to listen to William Cooper on shortwave
Oh, right.
way back in the day when he was doing Mystery Babylon, and
Oh, right.
yeah, that whole thing. And I knew that half of what I was listening to was BS, but some of it made sense, and so I would listen. I mean, I just I don't have to believe everything because I actually have a brain, and I have free will. But I can listen to people that I know are not giving me 100% fact. But I also know that there's people like that tell me what they think is true. Good example. Do you know who Al Bielek was?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so okay. So for a short time, I let Skybooks publish my Ong's Hat book. I took it back eventually, but I let them publish it for a while. And so when they were publishing that, I was in touch with Peter Moon a lot. And I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying I do something else, and I didn't want to keep doing. I didn't want to keep being associated with that, just because they have their thing and I have my thing. But I'm pretty sure Peter gave Al Bielek my phone number. This is years ago. This is like late 90s,
Right.
98, 99, 99 probably. And Al called me up to tell me the whole story about how he knew the people at the Ong's Hat ashram.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I just let him, I like, okay, give me a second, Al. I closed my office door, put him on speakerphone, put my feet up on the desk. I'm like, go for it. Give me the story. And I didn't correct him. I didn't say that's not true. I just let him tell me his story because Al used to love to talk. And I just really, really enjoyed it. It was like, I didn't believe it. Of course I didn't believe it, because I
Right.
had, facts that said different. But I let him tell the story. And I think he appreciated the fact that I didn't tell him he was full of it. I didn't tell him to go packing. I'm like, I listened to the story respectfully. I'm like, cool. And I said to myself in my head, he literally does believe this. I think he really believes it. I think he really believed the Philadelphia experiment stuff. I think he really believed it.
Right.
It doesn't mean it happened,
Right.
but it happened in Al's head.
Right.
And I never knew Preston from the Montauk Project. I never talked to him, but I think to a certain extent that was probably the truth with him too. Was like, I think he liked to tell stories, and I think a lot of it he convinced himself of. So, but Al, on the other hand, I did know Al. He talked to me several times. He called me and told me stories about Ong's Hat, and it was great. It was so enjoyable to me to hear this stuff, because it was a take that I'd never thought of before. Because Al had a wonderful imagination, and so he would give me these takes on let me tell you what was really happening in Ong's Hat. You're like, okay, tell me. And then he would tell me this stuff. I'm in my brain. I'm like, wow, I never thought of that before. That is interesting. So, it was fun. It was a fun ride. So when you go to the spook house, you don't go in there going, none of this is real.
Right.
You there's a suspension of disbelief. With the movies, you do the same thing. It's like, for this period of time, when these lights go down till these lights come back up, I'm going to suspend my disbelief so that I can enjoy the story being told to me. And so I treated Al Bielek as a movie. Like, he would call me and tell me stories, and I found it like interesting and entertaining. So with the Ong's Hat thing, I wrote myself into the story as an investigative reporter, which I clearly am not, but I wrote myself in as this underground investigative reporter, which I don't know if you noticed, but in the late 90s, everybody started to consider themselves a researcher online.
Right.
I was kind of like anticipating that in a way, I guess. I was being the researcher. Like, I had no credentials as a researcher, but I was the researcher. And then I picked that up from all these weird things I was reading in mail art. I was getting this stuff from P.O. boxes, and, it was written from the perspective of, I'm a researcher and I'm going to tell you the story. It's like, you know who these people are. But you take them at their word that they're a researcher. And you kind of like go for the story. You take the ride. What was it? Hunter S. Thompson said, you buy the ticket, you ride the ride.
Right.
So yeah, basically that's it. Like, you just buy the ticket and you ride the ride. And then afterwards, you might not keep riding the ride, but I think maybe it's easier for me to do that because I have a background in improv and method acting. So it was easy for me to turn it on and turn it off. Whereas I didn't understand that for some people, especially in the early days of the internet, and even now, they lost the ability to ascertain, is this online or is this real life? Because
Right.
online, there's no way you can, most of the time, you can't validate.
Right.
You have to take it at its word.
Right. And that's where a lot of people, they find stuff online like your story and stuff like that. And they at least these days, I notice that people will find something and they'll put it up and it is the absolute truth to them. And you cannot shake them. Like the whole thing now with the QAnon movement is kind of the same thing. There's enough there for people to get a morsel every once in a while to continue on with it. And, I find it fascinating because it's another thing, just like your story was. It was another thing. It was like, man, I'm on the inside on this. I'm following this, and it's so interesting that this piece here from a year ago correlates with what's going on here, and the thread is so thin between them. But when you've grown up listening to Art Bell and you've listened to all these fascinating stories, then you're like, well, there might be something to that. And that's just how our brains work when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not saying that everybody should follow QAnon. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that to me, it's almost like those lost footage movies, the found footage movies like The Fourth Kind and Blair Witch. And
well, I think I know that we, well, actually specifically this part of it, me, constructed the narrative to be that way, right? Somebody's saying hi. And I think that the QAnon definitely weaponized that methodology. That's a literary device that's been used for a long time. So if you look at for example, Peter Levenda, like, I know where he is now. He's Mr. UFO, and he's hooked up with Tom DeLonge, and he's like doing To the Stars Academy and all that kind of stuff. But back in the day, Levenda, wrote the Necronomicon, the one that Avon ended up publishing, which I think it was originally Magical Child published it. I have that edition. And then Avon picked it up and did a mass market version. And he did construct that, okay? And he wrote it under the name Simon. If people don't know that, I'm sorry, but that is what it is. What it is.
Well, they do now.
Well, they do now. They should know. And the device that he used was like he tied all these things in real life together into the story, so that it had anchors, right? And so Ongstad does the same thing. There's people that you can point to, like me. I'm a character in the story. Nick Herbert's a real character, a real person, character in the story. There's several people in the story that are real people. And so you can point to that and almost give an emotional anchor to it and say, oh, wait, this person's real. This book was really written. You know, maybe these other ones are. And Lovecraft did that to a less of an extent, but to an extent because he tied a lot of things to real life type characters. But definitely Lavinda picked it up and ran from there. And if you look at the evolution of that, where he took the next stage of that, it was like Sinister Forces. And if you look at the thing that he wrote as Simon, which is called Dead Names, he ties it into things that were really happening in New York around the time that the Necronomicon was, interpreted, compiled, written. And so it makes the story more powerful if you can point to things in real life and say, wait, that actually exists. I can put my finger on that. I can go to that place. I can find that person. I see that person actually existed in history. So that ties it into real life, which gives it an emotional anchor for the person to experience it. That's an old literary device.
Right.
I mean, Kerouac did that. Henry Miller did that. People that know how to write know how to do that. It's like these things really happen. These are real places. And yes, it's fiction, but there's also these real places that are tied to it. That's always the way it's been done. And so things like QAnon tied it into things like Comet Ping Pong Pizza,
right?
And all those kind of things. And you see how that turned out.
JFK Jr.
Yeah. JFK Jr., like that whole thing. So, it's an old literary device that's used again and again and again. Now that you have the online world and you have this delusional state that a lot of people exist in now because they're constantly tied to their screen.
Oh, yeah.
And they've forgotten that there's a world out here that doesn't have anything to do with that. It's a scary situation. In 2001, I shut down the game. I shut down the Ongstad experiment because I started to see that people were losing it.
Right.
There were people that were showing up at my house looking for looking for the secrets that I was hiding in my garage and what? There were people that were trying to start like a pseudo religion online using the Ongstad material. Like there was even one group of people that told me this was actually said to me that the Ongstad was a transmission that was intended for a member of their group, but I used black magic to hijack it.
Where do you go with that one?
Exactly. What do you do with that? What do you do with that?
Right. And you're sitting here and you're like, I've got this thing. It's an ongoing, evolving thing.
It's an art project, dude.
Right. And somebody comes out of nowhere and just slaps you over the back of the head with that one.
Yeah, and that's literally that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm winding this down. I'm out of here. And then, of course, I shut it down in August of 2001, and then 9/11 happened a month later. And of course, there was a big deal about he knew it was coming. I'm like, no, I didn't.
Yeah, I think at this point you just can't win with it. It's always going to be. It's always going to be there for you. Yeah. And so you had people showing up to your house, and I read something online the other day where obviously everything, when somebody shuts something down, and the prime example, okay, is going to be the Epstein files. Now where, part of the premise was, hey, we're going to release everything.
Right.
And then 5 months into the administration, there's
We don't
nothing
have
there.
anything.
We don't have anything. And people, no, bullshit. So people start hammering them.
Of
And
course, yeah.
now, well, we're going to release a video. And then that video's missing a minute of footage.
Yeah.
Right? Well, now that's turned into 3 minutes of footage.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
Yeah.
missing. Right? So now these days, there's no shutting anything down.
No.
There's not, because there's going to be people that are going to dig and dig and dig until they come up with something. And I mean,
And this is why I spent the last 7 years doing pretty high level media.
Right.
Where I said, this is like, let's unpack this and see how it's constructed, because I feel like it's being used for things like QAnon.
Right.
And even at that, after doing that, I still have people that come to me and say, of course you would say that.
Right. And
I just don't know what to do anymore, dude. I've done what I can do.
Right. It's, the people now, because you shut it down back then, basically said, all right, they got to him. They're making him shut it down.
Yeah.
And at this point, you just kind of, I guess you ride along with it at this point. You've done everything that you can do. And you're just like, what do I do?
What else do I do?
And so you do this, the high level media, instead of trying to get out there, and all it does is add fuel to the fire.
Yeah. So I basically don't do interviews anymore unless like somebody like you approaches me and I'm like, yeah, okay, he looks cool, I'll talk to him. But like if anybody from mainstream media approaches me anymore, I'm like, no, I don't do that anymore. I'm done. Like I can point to like 40 things I've done. So go listen to that. Like I just don't care anymore to like keep doing it over and over and over again. Because again, they're asking me to talk about the same story.
Right.
And I don't, and a lot of these media people, like especially the mainstream media people, they're like really combative.
Oh, of course.
They're like, yeah, but don't you feel responsible for QAnon? I'm like, no, I don't.
Why would you be responsible for QAnon? That, to me, what fascinates me is the story, because like I said, I was into all that stuff.
Me too.
Back then, and I'm like, holy smokes, there's something out there, and I got to dive into this. I didn't know about this. And then,
it's fanfic, man.
I go see Blair Witch in the movie theaters. I'm like, oh man, this is great. And then I see one of the actresses in a commercial. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, there's Heather. Then I see her in
mind.
another Steven Spielberg movie about UFOs, right? Okay,
yeah.
I get it. And I had known at that point that wasn't real.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, I enjoyed it so much. I know it's not real, but it's still cool. It doesn't make it any less cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I see The Fourth Kind with Mila Jovovich.
Yeah.
And about the the abductees in Alaska. And I'm like,
yeah.
How did I not know about this? This is freaking cool. And I mean, the websites and everything, because that's how they sold tickets.
Yeah.
Look at this. We just found, nobody knew about this until now. Dun, dun, dun.
Dude, I remember standing in line at the Blair Witch Project when it came out.
Right.
Listening to people in line telling each other that this is a real story. This is a true story. This is real footage. And I just sat there and like bit my lip. I'm like, oh my God, they're falling for it. And I'm, in a way, I felt jealous. I'm like, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do an Ong's Hat movie like this. Damn it, they beat me to it.
Right.
But
but you did it. But you did a found literature.
I did a found literature. Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, there was a movie that came out 2 months ago with people that were involved with the Blair Witch Project, and in the interview for the movie, they said, like, we did research and like we researched things like Ong's Hat, and I feel like that was actually the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project, because they didn't write it, you know. So it was so like, and then I talked to him afterwards, and it was like, you know, I felt vindicated in a way, but also it was like, well, you know, you guys were doing the movie thing. I wanted to do the movie thing, but I could have done the movie thing, and then I got distracted with the tech thing.
Right.
Because like I became a tech person in Silicon Valley, and like that takes up your whole life. And so like that's on me for not jumping fast enough, because I was going to do something like Blair Witch in the 90s, and I was working in independent film at that time, but then the internet happened and I was in the area, and so like all these jobs were like dangled in front of me. I'm like, oh, I got to do that, you know. So that's on me that I didn't jump fast enough. But I like that didn't help me keep me from enjoying the hell out of Blair Witch, which I did. I thought it was great. I didn't believe it. I didn't think it was real going into it. Right. But I thought it was masterfully handled the way they like positioned it. So it's like, is this real? You know, like that. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I thought it was great too. And you know, that was, I mean, we're talking, you know, X-Files was on TV.
Yeah, X-Files was in its heyday.
Oh, yeah. And we all ate that stuff up. I mean, I loved X-Files with the whole, you know, there's a alien race and there's this alien virus. And I mean, he tapped into just enough of, you know, the stuff. I mean, it was so unbelievable that it was believable to an extent. If that makes sense.
I think,
like,
you know, I think Chris Carter was reading the same websites we were.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he knew, you know, there's enough people out there that love this stuff.
Yeah. And there was enough of this stuff that was out there and new that we didn't see. Because, you know, a lot of this stuff, when it first comes out, for me anyway, it's like, it's intriguing and it's entertaining. So, for example, in the late 90s, David Icke.
Oh, right. Reptilian.
I thought that stuff was hilarious.
Right.
I didn't and later it became kind of like weird quasi-religious, and like a lot of people took that shit seriously, you know?
Right.
Like to a point where it was unhealthy.
Well, same thing with the William Cooper stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a lot of people, and look, I don't judge William Cooper one way or the other. The guy's not here to defend himself anymore.
Right.
So I don't judge him one way or the other. Yeah. And I listen to some of his stuff every once in a while, and some stuff's like, well, he's kind of got a point there. And then other stuff's like, dude, what the hell are you talking about?
Dude, you did not see documents when you're in the Navy. I'm sorry, William Cooper.
Right.
Like,
but
yeah.
But you sold a lot of books over it.
Well, you just you suspended your disbelief when he said things like that. I did anyway.
Right.
I'm like, well, that didn't happen. So a good example, like Bob Lazar. Everybody like jumped on board for that. And then they asked me, like, what do you think of Bob Lazar? I'm like, I think it's an entertaining story. He tells it well. Like, yeah, but do you think it was real? I'm like, no. They're like, why don't you think it was real? Like, well, clue number one, who's his BFF?
Right.
Do you know?
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, you're talking John Lear. You're talking
Lear.
John,
I'm talking about Lear.
John Alexander. You know,
I'm talking about Lear. I'm talking about Lear. Lear is a great storyteller, and he's absolutely full of shit. But he's a great storyteller.
You know, what's funny with John Lear is that I think he started off, you know, just gathering all of this information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then at some point, I think it's not that they got to him. I think he just started getting information, and it fed into his whole belief.
Well, people were volunteering information to him because he was a perfect candidate for it.
Right.
You know?
Well, that goes back to, you know, the days of William Moore.
Yeah, William Moore, Rick Doty.
Right, Rick Doty, you know, Paul Benowitz.
Benowitz, exactly.
They drove that guy insane.
No, they drove him insane, yeah.
what they did to that guy was not
Not cool.
okay.
Not cool.
But again, he was just like us in the sense that he
But in
was
a lot of ways, he volunteered for it.
right. And
I'm
it
not
was
saying it
another
was right,
right.
but yeah.
It was just another social experiment to see what they could do to how far they could push somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and even Doty says, you know, he's like, we're gonna give you just enough of the truth surrounded by things that are bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to hide something, hide it right out in the open.
Yeah.
Right. And Doty, he's gone on record and saying that's exactly how we did it. We fed him just enough. And I mean, even to this day, people are still in Dulce, Mexico, Dulce, New Mexico, looking for the base and claiming, oh, they planted fake air vents on the mountains.
Yeah.
So when people took helicopter rides over the mountains, they would see an air vent there.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing of it is, I'm going to sit here and go, you know, I'm not saying Dulce's not real. I'm not saying it's real. It's a fascinating story.
And it's a convenient distraction.
Right. And, you know, you get that's from years of listening to Art Bell. Art Bell always said, look, man, I'm just giving you the opportunity to hear the information. I'm not telling you if it's real or not. He's like, I'm just providing you a platform so you can hear the information.
I mean, a lot of people probably don't want to hear this, but you have to hand it to Rick Doty.
Right.
Of like looking at the situation and going, wait, instead of denying this stuff, we should like lean into it.
Right.
And so like basically what Rick Doty was one of the first people to understand was the same thing that Steve Bannon says right now, which is flood the zone with shit.
Right.
So you don't know what's real and what's not real. There's so much information that you get overwhelmed and you're like, and you kind of end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah, the
one
Alex
piece
Jones
of truth,
method.
the Alex Jones method, the one piece of truth you should be hanging on to is like so diluted by all the other stuff that you need to get rid of that you like just throw it, you like, just throw it all out, you know?
Right. And that's
or you believe it all. Either way, same thing.
Right. And that's kind of the QAnon thing as well, is there's something in there that you're like, holy shit, that makes all the sense in the world.
Right.
And then the next post is JFK Jr. still alive.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he's still alive or not. I don't want to tell anybody he's not. I'm not going to tell anybody he's actually dead. It's just another one of those things. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I think if he were still alive and this whole QAnon thing is real, man, what a story. I mean, that you know, that feeds into, there are people, you know, in there that are fighting the system. You know, there are Neo and Morpheus in there trying to fight this system.
I wish, I hope.
Right. And like I said, it's so convoluted with all of these crazy things, you know, and then you'll see an interview with somebody and they're doing a video chat like us. And then you look in the background and the clock, it's a Mickey Mouse clock on 10 and 2.
Right.
You know, and you're like, oh, that guy's trying to show us something. You know? Or they show a video and Trump points at somebody and does a little thing. And they're like, he just made a Q in the middle of the air. You know, and Trump looked at it like this, is like, I'm not going to deny it because these people are showing up to my rally. There's a movement.
And they're voting for me.
Right. There's a movement to clamp on to.
Yeah.
You know, and Q's whole thing is we're fighting for the country and we're fighting for the world. And this isn't just the United States. We got to start here, but we're fighting for the world. This has gone on way too long. And you watch the videos and everything, and you're just like, holy smokes, this makes all the sense in the world. So whether it's another social experiment or whether it's actually real or not, I don't know. But it just kind of ties into how you can put something on the internet and it just immediately, if it relates to somebody, a certain group of people, it grows legs.
Yeah.
You know, and just like your story did. And so at this point, 25 years later, you know, from, it's longer than that at this point, you know, 1989, when you started the story and everything. So 27 years later, 26 years later, do you feel it's had a negative impact on your life at this point, or you think it's just kind of it's a thing that's
Well,
always going to be there?
Well, it's always going to be there, but I think I caught it and nipped it in the bud early enough because, like in 2001, when I shut it down, there were a couple of things happening. There was people showing up at my house. That was not cool. There was people that said things to me, like I said to you earlier, like, we're the four that have the real truth, and you're the black magician who intercepted the transmission. Like, what? And then there's other people that talked to me and said, basically, this is becoming a movement, and you should become the leader. And I'm like, that was not the intention of this ever. Like, I don't want to lead a cult. I don't like cults. I have an allergy to religion.
Right.
I'm a spiritual person, but like organized religion, I'm allergic. And so I just like, I got to shut it down because like this is not good. But I also did meet a lot of people who understood what I was doing. And there was a grassroots movement that started called Alternate Reality Gaming around that time, about the same time I left the project or shut down the project. And so I started working with those people, and those people were grounded and sane, and they understood what was going on. And so we were able to build stories using the methodology that I had worked out and like adopted some new stuff. And so that's good. And so it started a new art movement, basically. Alternate reality gaming, which became transmedia, which became full circle back to what we used to call it in a university, which is multidisciplinary work.
Right.
And so university people started paying attention and writing papers about it and writing books about it. And I had conversations with people. And so it led to that. That's good. There was a hiccup when people wanted to blame me for QAnon. That's not good, but I went on the offensive with that. And then to this day, the thing that I feel is the payoff is that it definitely gave me a platform to write other books about other things and do other artworks, including the last thing I just released called Ong's Hat Complete, which is this story of what I was doing, why I was doing it, and how I did it from the behind the scenes. So it was behind the curtain story,
right.
Which there's some interesting, weird paranormal stuff that happened that I never really talked about much publicly, that I talked about in the book. And basically what I did is I did a book, and then I did a podcast for each chapter of the book. So you could read the book, and then you could 14 hours of podcasts that goes with the book. Yeah, that goes with the book.
Okay.
So plug in, get ready, strap in.
Right.
But that's my explanation. Like, if you want the explanation, it exists. But you have to read the book and listen to the 14 hours of audio to get it all, because it's not an audio book of the book.
Right.
It's two different pieces of one work.
Right.
But the most gratifying thing that I can say is there's been a resurgence of grassroots alternate reality gaming that's popped up on the internet. Like, there's all these people doing grassroots stuff, because for a while, even I was being contacted by marketing companies. Can you do an ARG for our movie? Can you do an ARG for our game release? And I did some of those things for pay, and then I stopped doing it because I felt weird. I have other friends that made a whole career out of it. And that's cool. I don't begrudge them. It wasn't for me. And now that's worn off, thankfully. And now we can return to, like, this whole thing was like a grassroots underground punk rock type movement, DIY kind of thing.
Right.
And it's returned to that. And I'm contacted no exaggeration, like every week by a young person who tells me, I'm inspired by what you did. Would you look at what I'm doing? And I look at their artwork and I'm like, that is really cool.
Right.
Good for you. And they're not doing it to be famous. They're not doing it to make a lot of money. They're doing it as an expression of their art. And that makes me happy.
Well, damn Skippy.
Yeah.
Damn Skippy. Yeah, and that's great because I mean you've kind of seen this thing come full circle in the sense, and now, 26, 27 years later, now's when you're really reaping the benefits on a personal level.
Yeah.
From it, because it's for a while it was a monkey on your back, monkey on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of seeing the benefits of it because people have been inspired by it. So now it's kind of like, all right, what's going to come up? What's going to slap us in the face now? And when I brought up the whole QAnon thing, I had no idea that people had associated you with it. So that was just out of the blue. So I apologize. I had no idea. So
I mean, it was inevitable that people would make the correlation between this looks like an ARG and where did ARGs come from, and then they would show up on my doorstep, figuratively, because I've had literal people showing up on my doorstep. Figuratively, they'd show up on my doorstep and like, well, what do you have to say for yourself? I'm like, I have nothing to say for myself. This was never the intention.
Right.
The fact that this got weaponized is like everything else that gets weaponized. Like most things in this world are not constructed to be weapons.
Right.
Most things in this world are weaponized. They're constructed to be something else. I mean, yes, there are things that are like specifically made to be weapons, and I'm not going to say they're not. They are. But there's a lot of things that get weaponized. And that's not the default of the person who created the thing that got weaponized. That's the default of the weaponizer.
Right.
Right. It's like I can create this hammer for driving nails or breaking rocks or whatever it's for, and it can become a weapon of murder.
Right.
But it's not my fault that I created the hammer. It's not my fault.
Right.
Like I created the wheel, and now it's a thing that runs people over when it's being piloted by drunk drivers.
Right.
It's not my fault that I created the wheel. It's like,
right.
So you have to like just look at that and realize like, and it's hard to do when everybody's yelling at you to like say it's not my fault, but you can do it. And the other example is like, just don't listen. I mean, if you did something, take responsibility for it. Absolutely. But, if you did, like, for example, if I had not shut the game down when I did, and if I had encouraged people to join my cult,
right,
I could have turned this thing into a cult.
Oh, very easily.
There was a window there where it was literally in front of me, and I could have done that. And that's what made me shut it down. I'm like, if I'm thinking of this, other people are thinking of it.
Right. Yeah, you're not the only one that's sitting back going, "Oh man."
Well, I told you, like there was a group of people that actually told me, like, "Oh, this was meant for us." It's like,
right.
What kind of horse shit is that?
Well, it's the Heaven's Gate people all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's always going to happen. Unfortunately, on the internet, as we learned with things like Heaven's Gate, it's an amplifier for a lot of people because there's nothing there to stop them from just conjecturing and running with this stuff. And then you get, unfortunately, there's people in this world that look for things like that to do so they can control people. And so they look for that and then they latch onto it.
Right.
And I think the people that I'm talking about, who were trying to form this little Ong's Hat cult, they did originally try to sidle up to me, and I was like having nothing of it. I'm like, no, that's not what it is. No, and so they're like, oh, then we'll do it ourselves. Like I was not having it because that's not what it was. It was never intended for that, ever.
Right. You just created this thing going, man, this is cool. I can run with this story and it continues to grow and morph and everything. And somebody takes it too literally and takes it off in a direction that you never intended it to go to. And it's so uncomfortable, the direction they're taking it. And you're just sitting here scratching your head going, what the hell are you thinking?
Well, a good example is like, because the great thing about this story is it allowed me to do, modular art.
Right.
So I kept adding pieces to it as time went on. So the great thing is like Al Bielek and this woman, I never got her real name. She called herself Madam X. Called me up and told me all these stories about the Ong's Hat Ashram, claiming they knew the people that lived there.
Right.
And that actually inspired me to call up a couple of my friends who I worked with in acting. And I said, I'm gonna write an outline. I'm not gonna write it scripted. I'm just gonna write an outline. I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna record the phone call, and we're all gonna play characters. I'm, the guy who's the researcher.
Right.
You two used to live on the ashram when you were kids. And I told them, like, read up on the material, just have it in your head, and then let's story tell to each other and record it. And nobody knows where this is going. This is total improv, total method acting. So the story about the survivors has become known. The story of the survivors was an improv session that was recorded. That's all it was.
Right.
Non-scripted improv session, period. None of us knew where it was going. And because the one guy didn't do his research as much as he should have, he claimed that there was this thing that he held. He's like, when I held the egg in my hand, and then the other actor picked up, and I picked up on that, like, held the egg in your hand. What? It's big enough to climb in. How can you hold it in your hand? And so, like, we had to backtrack, and out of that came the meditation egg, or the key egg, that all came out of an accident in improv. And, Del Close said there are no accidents in improv. So you lean into the accident. So we leaned into the accident. And now there was a whole new chapter that got added to the Ong's Hat story based on an improv accident.
Right.
And so I actually built a handheld egg and took photographs with it and, like, wrote a story about it. And so that's how the story evolved.
Right.
It was 100% improv. Like, if you've ever studied improv and you look at this thing, you're like, oh, okay, he's doing improv.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we were doing.
Wow.
It's like, here's an idea, run with it.
Right. So here we are today, 2025, and you said you've written a new book that kind of gives it's kind of the story from your side of it and how you took the story and how you evolved the story and everything.
Yep.
And that's meant to kind of be hey, if you're into this, read this book, because this is the final chapter in the book.
Yep.
Or in the story. And so is that book available on Amazon?
Oh, yeah.
Where's it available? Okay.
It's available on Amazon. You can go to my website,
okay.
josephmatheny.com. It's at the very top. It's called Ong's Hat Complete, Compleat,
Okay.
Old English spelling.
Right.
It's like a witch's Bible complete.
Right.
So and it's a 2-part. So there's a print book or Kindle, and there's a audible.com, which is the podcast stuff. So basically, like, every chapter, there's a podcast for every chapter. So you can just buy the book if you just want to read the book. Okay. The book gives you everything you need to know. A lot of links in the book. So I would get a digital version, not a print version. But if you just read print, it's got an appendix in the back that has all the links. If you want to do that, type it up, fine. There's a Kindle version. Then there's a book that I sell. There's a set that I sell through what's called Send Owl. You can see that on my website, and it's you can either buy the book, the digital version of the book, or you can buy the audio, or you can buy the set, the book and the set. And that's what I tell people, like, this is really a 2-piece thing. So, buy the 2-piece if you can.
Right.
If you're price constrained, I understand. But like, we put a lot of work into this. So I did it with a friend of mine. We put a lot of work into this. And so there's 13 hours of audio, 13 and a half hours of audio, and a book. And that is the complete story. So if people say you never told the story, they're wrong. It's right there, right there. So if you want to know the real story, and a lot of it's weird, then there you go. It's like what people. I did say this on the forums back in the day, but it caused a weird reaction, so I didn't talk about it for a long time afterwards. But I was using, because I'm a programmer and I was working in Silicon Valley, and I was using what for its time was the Chat GPT of its time.
Right.
Very rudimentary AI with a chat interface. So I was using that as an oracle for the improv stuff that I was doing. I was like using it to come up with story ideas. I was using it, all kinds of things. There was a chat bot that was running online that you could write to by email, and it would actually talk to you. And a lot of people didn't know it was a chat bot, which was weird for me to look at and see people that couldn't figure it out. I'm like, really? You can't figure out this is a bot? But they couldn't. Some people couldn't. So like there was a lot of stuff going on in the background that I never actually formally talked about, because like when I shut it down, I just kind of shut it down because like I just had it.
Right.
And when people started showing up at my house, I'm like, no.
Right.
No. Because the one person I had to walk off my property was gone, And so I had to have a conversation with that guy. And it took a minute to get through to him because he was like grinning, had that weird, far away grin thing, And I finally got his attention. I'm like, dude, this is a 9mm Beretta handgun. It's loaded and the safety is off. Do you understand?
Right.
And I looked him in the eye and he got it.
Right.
And he stopped smiling. I'm like, you need to leave. And I never need to see you trying to come into my house again, because next time I will just shoot you and bury you somewhere. I won't call the cops.
Right.
And he left and I didn't see him again.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
because, in those, am I on X? No, I'm not on X anymore. In those circumstances, you have to like really do something severe to get people's attention, because they're not there. They're not listening to you, So you have to get their attention and like really get through to them. Like, no, this is not a joke.
Right.
Whatever reality you've built in your head, this isn't it.
Right. Okay. Well, that you're absolutely right. That makes all the sense in the world. So as we wind this down, I just want to say thank you again, sir, for taking the time. I know you don't do
Sure.
a bunch of interviews anymore, and I know probably the last thing you really want to do is get the Ong's hat thing fired up again. But I'm just so fascinated. Like I said, I didn't know that it
It's
wasn't
never
real.
going to go away, dude. So I
Right.
know that.
Right. But I was just
but at least I've got in front of it a little bit and said,
right.
if you're going to interact with this, there's no way you can't know that this
Right.
is an art project. You know what I mean?
And that's what's so fascinating to me about it, is that it was a project and you continuously worked on it. And here we are, this amount of time later into it, and it still continues. Obviously not, at least from what I can see, as heavy as it was before, because like you said, you got in front of it a little bit. But I mean, you've got your book and the podcast and everything, and it's your side of the whole story. And it's just so fascinating to me, just the whole premise behind the whole thing. And
Well, there's also, you can find all this on my website. Last year before, it came out last year, but year before last, I spent months with a crew from BBC and Audible.com.
oh, right.
They sponsored an Audible original, and we did a documentary about Ong's Hat. I mean, not a fictional thing, but like, what was I trying to do? What was the outcome of it? And we ended up winning best of 2024 on Audible, and then we won a Audible Documentary Festival award.
Nice.
So we got a bunch of awards, and it's really well done. It's the guy Mark Fennell, who does BBC documentaries.
Okay.
So it's 3 or 4 hours long. It's on. If you're an Audible member, you get it for free. And if you're not an Audible member, they like $6 or something like that. But it's an Audible original, so that's also like an explanation. Like I got to tell my story.
Right.
So it's out there. Like there's absolutely nobody that can say I didn't know this was fiction.
Right.
You have no excuse.
Right. Yeah. There's no excuse at this point. If they've dived into it far enough, they're gonna find out that it's fiction.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sir, I will let you get back to enjoying the rest of your day, but I did want to say thank you for meeting me here online. It's such an early time in the morning, and this has been a blast. I've learned a lot.
This has been a blast,
and I've enjoyed it, and hopefully I've picked your brain a little bit, and maybe we can get together again at some other time and talk something else. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I've got a trilogy we could talk about, so check that out.
Yeah, we'll dive into that as well. And
that's on my website.
Okay, yeah. So josephmatheny.com, everybody.
JOSEPHMATHENY.com.
Go to his website. If you're into, I don't want to say conspiracy because it's not a conspiracy, but if you're into good storytelling and how stories can, get people involved and how stories can evolve using different forms of media and everything, definitely check out anything that Joseph's done.
You could say conspiracy culture because I am heavily influenced by conspiracy culture, because I consider conspiracy culture the modern folktales, the modern mythology.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those folktales from back in the day
have a meaning.
There was something to them, even if it was just a small thing. There was something.
Don't go in that part of the forest because you're going to eat by a bear.
Exactly. All right, my friend. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
And we'll chat soon. And again, thank you very much for hopping on the podcast with me.
Yeah.
And I wish you nothing but the best. And
you too.
We'll talk.
This has been enjoyable. See, this is the kind of stuff I like to do. So this has been awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you have a great day, Joseph, and we'll talk soon, buddy.
Okay. Take care.
Take care, sir. Well, there you have it, everybody. josephmatheny.com, talking Ong's Hat and how things evolve and the original premise behind the whole thing. And if you don't know, it was fiction. It wasn't real. Parts of it, based on other things. It was kind of the premise before we got into Blair Witch and The Fourth Kind and any of those found footage movies. Ong's Hat was kind of, it influenced a lot of things. And so if you do decide to go back and watch this from the beginning, Joseph dives into that. There you go. Such a fascinating premise, what he did. Again, this podcast available on all major podcast platforms as an audio podcast. You've got us here on rumble.com/earmodpodcast. You've got us on YouTube, youtube.com/earmodpodcast. We're on X at Earmob Podcast on X, Facebook, Earmob Podcast. We're everywhere. We're kind of running the gambit here. Again, thank you so much for Snoop for coming in and interacting with us and watching the show. We've got a couple other viewers out there. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you guys, especially being here so early in the morning. We got Von Poop is on here, and we got Snoop as well. Appreciate you guys. Rock on. Until next time, I'm going to leave you with this little goose egg right here.
You just listen to the Ear Mob Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow.